The second day of the summit began with what the coalition called a cultural exchange. Each species was invited to demonstrate something unique about their civilization. Some showed art, some played music, some performed dances that had been passed down for thousands of years. The Kethrani chose to demonstrate combat. A large section of the main hall had been converted into an arena. The floor was covered with soft padding that could absorb impacts. Floating cameras circled above to capture everything from multiple angles. Thousands of beings filled the seats around the arena, eager to watch. Megan stood with the rest of the human delegation near the back. Admiral Blake had positioned them there on purpose. He wanted to keep a low profile after the events of the previous night. He hoped that staying quiet and invisible would help avoid any more conflict. Megan understood his reasoning, but she did not agree with it. The Kethrani performance began with a display of their traditional weapons. Warriors demonstrated swords with 4 handles, designed for their 4 arms. They showed spears that could be thrown with incredible force. They displayed shields that locked together to form an unbreakable wall. Then came the hand-to-hand combat demonstrations. General Vorax himself stepped into the arena. He had removed his ceremonial armor and wore only simple training clothes. His scales gleamed under the bright lights. His 4 arms hung loose at his sides, each one thick enough to crush stone. 3 Kethrani warriors entered the arena to face him. They were young and strong, elite soldiers chosen for this honor. Any one of them could have killed most beings in the room without breaking a sweat. Vorax defeated all 3 of them in less than 2 minutes. His speed was terrifying. His strength was overwhelming. He moved like a force of nature, blocking strikes with 2 arms while attacking with the other 2. He threw one warrior across the arena like a toy. He slammed another into the ground so hard the padding cracked. He caught the third in a hold that bent his arm backward until the young soldier tapped out in surrender. When it was over, Vorax stood in the center of the arena without a scratch. He was not even breathing hard. He raised all 4 arms in victory, and the Kethrani in the audience roared with approval. The other species clapped politely. Many looked nervous. The demonstration had been a message. The Kethrani were not just warriors. They were something close to living weapons. Then Vorax did something unexpected. Instead of leaving the arena, he walked toward the edge where the human delegation stood. His yellow eyes found Admiral Blake, and his mouth stretched into a smile that showed all his teeth. "Perhaps the humans would like to demonstrate their fighting arts," he said loudly, making sure his translator projected his words to everyone in the hall. "We could all use some entertainment." The crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to the humans. Admiral Blake stepped forward with careful dignity. "We thank the general for his invitation, but we did not prepare a combat demonstration for this summit. Perhaps another time." Vorax laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the arena. "Ah, I understand. Humans prefer to fight with their machines, drones and bombs, and ships that shoot from far away. They lack the courage for real combat. The kind where you must look into your enemy's eyes." A murmur went through the crowd. Some aliens nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "It is nothing to be ashamed of," Vorax continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Prey animals have always used tricks to survive. It is their nature. They cannot help being weak." Admiral Blake kept his expression neutral, but Megan could see the tension in his shoulders. He was trying to find words that would end this situation without making things worse. He never got the chance. Megan stepped forward before anyone could stop her. Her voice was clear and calm, cutting through the silence like a knife. "I will accept your challenge, General." The words hung in the air. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Vorax turned his massive head to look at her. His yellow eyes studied her small form with obvious amusement. She barely came up to his chest. Her arms were thin enough that he could wrap one hand around both of them. "A female youngling?" he said, letting out another laugh. "The humans send their weakest to face me? This is their response to my challenge?" He looked around the arena, inviting everyone to share in the joke. Many aliens did laugh. Some shook their heads in disbelief. A few covered their eyes, unable to watch what they believed would be a slaughter. Admiral Blake grabbed Megan's arm. "Cadet," he said quietly, his voice tight with warning. "Stand down. That is an order." Megan met his eyes. She did not flinch. She did not look away. "With respect, sir," she said softly, "if we back down now, every species in this room will remember it. They will remember that humans were called prey and said nothing. They will remember that we were mocked and did nothing. Is that the message we want to send?" Blake stared at her for a long moment. His jaw worked as he considered her words. He knew she was right. He also knew that sending her into that arena might get her killed. But he also knew something else. He had read her file. He knew what she was capable of. After what felt like an eternity, he released her arm and stepped back. "Do not die, Cadet," he said quietly. "That is also an order." Megan allowed herself a small smile. "Understood, sir." She walked toward the arena. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Some aliens whispered to each other, placing bets on how long she would last. Most guessed seconds. A few generous ones gave her a full minute. Vorax watched her approach with the expression of someone who had just been given a gift. His forearms crossed over his chest, and his smile grew even wider. "I admire your courage, little human," he said, as she stepped onto the padded floor. "It is foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. I will try not to break you too quickly. Your admiral might need someone to carry his bags home." The Kathrani officer sitting nearby burst into laughter. Megan said nothing. She simply began to remove her formal jacket. Underneath, she wore a simple white undershirt. Her arms were lean but defined, shaped by years of training. She folded her jacket neatly and handed it to another cadet who had followed her to the edge of the arena. Then she turned to face Vorax. She settled into a relaxed stance. Her weight was balanced evenly on both feet. Her arms hung loose at her sides. Her breathing was slow and steady. She looked like someone waiting for a bus, not someone about to fight a monster. The officiating Valorian, a being made of floating blue light, drifted to the center of the arena. It raised a ceremonial staff that had been used to start combat demonstrations for centuries. "The challenge has been accepted," it announced. "The fight will continue until one participant yields, is unable to continue, or is judged defeated by the official. Are both participants ready?" Vorax cracked his neck, producing sounds like breaking wood. "I have been ready since before this child was born." Megan simply nodded. The Valorian raised the staff high. The entire hall held its breath. The staff came down. "Begin." General Vorax did not wait. The moment the staff came down, he exploded forward with speed that seemed impossible for something so large. His forearms spread wide like the jaws of a trap, ready to catch, crush, and destroy. The ground shook under his massive feet. Air rushed past him as he closed the distance. To most observers, he was simply too fast to track. One moment he was standing still. The next moment he was crossing the arena like a living avalanche. They had seen him do this against his own warriors. They knew what came next. The grab, the throw, the breaking of bones. The human girl did not stand a chance, except she was not standing where she had been. Megan had started moving the instant his muscles tensed. Not backward, which was what everyone expected. She moved forward and to the side, flowing like smoke through the gaps between his reaching arms. Her body twisted in ways that seemed boneless, slipping past fingers that could crush steel. Vorax's hands closed on empty air. He spun, confused for only a fraction of a second. In Kathrani combat, opponents either ran away or tried to block. They did not dance through your arms like ghosts. But he was a veteran of countless battles. He adapted instantly, sweeping 2 arms low, while stabbing 2 arms high, covering all possible escape routes. Again, Megan was not there. She had dropped to the ground and rolled past his legs, coming up behind him in a single fluid motion. Her hand touched his back, light as a feather, before she sprang away again. The touch was not an attack. It was a message. I could have hurt you. Vorax roared in frustration. The sound echoed through the silent hall, making several smaller aliens cover their ears. He turned and attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes that had killed enemy commanders on a dozen worlds. His fists moved like hammers, each one capable of shattering bones. Megan did not try to block. Blocking something that powerful would have broken her arms. Instead, she redirected. Her palms guided his strikes past her body, using his own momentum against him. She turned his power into empty motion, making him punch air while she moved to positions he could not easily reach. She stayed close, too close for him to build up full force, too close for his size to be an advantage. The crowd watched in stunned silence. This was not what combat was supposed to look like. There was no dramatic clash of strength against strength. There was just a tiny human slipping through a storm of violence, like rain through leaves. But Megan was not just surviving. She was studying. Every movement Vorax made told her something. The way he shifted his weight before a strike. The slight delay between his upper arms and lower arms. The rhythm of his breathing. The blind spots created by his flat face and wide-set eyes. She had spent years learning this. Not just human combat, but the anatomy of every major species in the Coalition. She knew where Kathrani kept their nerve clusters. She knew which joints bent the wrong way. She knew that their scales were thickest on their fronts, but thinner under their arms and behind their legs. She knew exactly how to break them. Vorax pulled back, breathing harder now, not from exhaustion, but from frustration. He had never faced an opponent like this. Enemies were supposed to fight or flee. This human did neither. She just floated around him like a bad dream, always present, but never catchable. Enough games, he growled. Stand and fight like a warrior. She stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, her arms at her sides, her eyes locked on his. I am fighting, she said calmly. You just cannot see it yet. Vorax snarled and charged again. This time he was smarter. He did not reach with all 4 arms. He kept 2 back, to guard against her strange movements. He aimed to grab her with his lower arms and hold her in place, while his upper arms delivered the finishing blow. It was a good strategy. It might have worked against another opponent. But Megan had already seen through it. She waited until the last possible moment, until his lower arms were fully committed to the grab. Then she did something that made several alien scientists in the audience gasp with disbelief. She jumped, not away from him, toward him. She launched herself directly at his chest, twisting in midair to slip between his grasping hands. Her knee came up as she rose, striking the soft tissue under his left lower arm. At the same time, her elbow drove into the nerve cluster where his neck met his shoulder. Vorax grunted in pain and surprise. His left lower arm went numb, hanging uselessly at his side. Before he could react, Megan had bounced off his chest like a ball and landed behind him. 2 of his arms now worked correctly. The other 2 tingled with strange sensations he had never felt before. The crowd began to murmur. Some aliens leaned forward in their seats. Others exchanged shocked glances. What they were watching was impossible. A creature a fraction of the general's size was actually hurting him. Admiral Blake stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His face showed nothing, but his eyes never left Megan. He had seen her training records. He knew what she could do in a controlled environment. This was real, and she was winning. Vorax turned slowly. For the first time, there was something other than amusement in his yellow eyes. There was caution. There was confusion. And buried deep beneath both of those, there was the first tiny seed of fear. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Megan tilted her head slightly. "I am human, General. We are what happens when a weak species refuses to die." She settled back into her relaxed stance. Her breathing was still slow and steady. She had not even broken a sweat. "Shall we continue?" she asked. Vorax flexed his injured arms, trying to force feeling back into them. His pride would not allow him to quit. He was a general of the Kethrani Empire. He had conquered worlds. He would not be defeated by something he could hold in one hand. He attacked again, leading with his two good arms, while his damaged ones followed behind. He was faster now, more desperate, throwing everything he had into each strike. Megan kept dancing. She moved through his attacks like water flowing around rocks. She was always exactly where he was not. She touched him here and there, like taps that seemed meaningless, but sent strange tingles through his body. His movements became slower, less coordinated. Something was wrong with his muscles. Something was wrong with his nerves. He did not understand what was happening. The fight had been going on for nearly a minute now. To the watching crowd, that seemed like an eternity. They had expected the human to fall in seconds. Instead, she was systematically taking apart one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. And she was doing it without throwing a single punch. Megan finally stopped retreating. She planted her feet and faced Vorax directly. Her eyes were calm and focused. "You asked if I was ready to fight like a warrior," she said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "I was being polite, giving you a chance to surrender with your pride intact." She raised her hands slowly, settling into a fighting stance that humans had developed over thousands of years. A stance designed not for display, but for killing. "But you do not understand politeness, do you? You only understand strength." Vorax gathered every bit of power he had left. His good arms clenched into fists. His legs tensed for one final charge. "Then let me speak your language," Megan whispered. And then she moved. What happened next would be studied by military academies across the galaxy for the next 100 years. Scholars would slow down the recordings to 1,000th normal speed. They would analyze every movement, every angle, every point of contact. They would write papers with titles like The Cole Maneuver and Precision Violence, Human Combat Doctrine. But in the moment, it was over before most observers even understood it had begun. 3 seconds. That was all it took. In the first second, Megan closed the distance between herself and General Vorax. She did not run. She did not leap. She simply moved forward with a kind of terrible efficiency that made everything before look like playing. Her body stayed low, slipping under the arc of his hastily raised arms. Every movement she had made before had been preparation. Every touch, every tap, every seemingly meaningless contact had been gathering information and weakening specific points. Now, she used that information. Her left palm struck the nerve cluster under his right lower arm, the same spot she had tested earlier. This time, she did not hold back. The force of the blow traveled through his scales and into the soft tissue beneath, disrupting the signals between his brain and his limb. His right lower arm stopped responding entirely. Her right elbow continued upward, finding the gap between the scales on his left side. Kethrani's scales overlapped like armor, but they had to move somewhere, and where they moved, they left small vulnerabilities. She had noticed this gap during their dance. Now she exploited it. In the second, Megan continued her attack without pause. Her knee drove into the joint behind his left leg, hitting the spot where two bones connected. Kethrani legs were built differently from human legs, with joints that bent at strange angles. Most species did not understand how they worked. Megan had spent months studying their anatomy during her training. The impact hyperextended the joint beyond its normal range. Pain shot through his entire lower body, and his leg buckled. At the same time, she grabbed one of his upper arms and used his own falling momentum to pull him further off balance. He began to fall. In the second, Megan struck 3 more times in rapid succession. Her fist found the pressure point at the base of his skull, where the spine met the brain. Her palm hit the center of his chest, stopping his hearts for just a fraction of a second. Her fingers jabbed the sensitive spots on either side of his throat, cutting off blood flow to his brain. General Vorax, conqueror of 12 worlds, undefeated champion of the Kethrani Empire, terror of 100 battlefields, collapsed to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling, with eyes that could see, but a body that would not respond. He tried to move his arms. They would not obey. He tried to breathe. His lungs stuttered and struggled. He tried to speak, but only a weak gurgling sound came from his throat. Megan stood over him, perfectly balanced, her breathing slow and steady. She had not even broken a sweat. There was no anger on her face, no pride, no cruelty. She looked like a doctor who had just completed a difficult surgery. The arena was utterly silent. Then someone screamed. It was a Kethrani officer rushing forward from his seat, certain that their general was dead. Other Kethrani followed, their roars of rage filling the hall. They thought they had witnessed murder. Admiral Blake stepped forward immediately, placing himself between Megan and the approaching warriors. His voice boomed across the arena with authority that stopped them in their tracks. "Stand down. The fight was conducted according to coalition rules. Your general lives." Medical officers from several species rushed into the arena. They surrounded Vorax, scanning him with devices and shouting readings to each other. One of them, a Valorian medical specialist, looked up with an expression that might have been amazement. "He is alive," the specialist announced. "His vital signs are stable. There is no permanent damage. She has simply turned him off." The Kethrani officer stared at the human girl who had done the impossible. "His nervous system has been temporarily disrupted," the specialist continued, running more scans. "The signals from his brain are not reaching his body. It is like she pressed specific buttons in a specific order and shut him down. I have never seen anything like this." Megan stepped back, giving the medical teams room to work. She retrieved her jacket from the cadet who had been holding it and put it back on, smoothing the wrinkles with careful precision. The crowd remained silent. Thousands of beings from dozens of species sat frozen in their seats, trying to process what they had witnessed. They had come expecting to see a human embarrassed, perhaps injured, possibly killed. Instead, they had watched a creature a fraction of the general's size dismantle him with surgical precision. 3 seconds. Vorax began to recover within a few minutes. His limbs started twitching. His breathing steadied. His eyes focused again, though they were filled with something he had never felt before: confusion and shame. He swayed for a moment, then steadied himself. He looked around the arena at all the eyes watching him. He saw pity in some faces. He saw satisfaction in others. He saw fear in a few. Then he looked at Megan. She stood with Admiral Blake and the rest of the human delegation. She was not smiling. She was not gloating. She simply stood there, as calm and quiet as she had been before the fight began. Vorax tried to understand what had happened. He was bigger. He was stronger. He was faster. He had 4 arms to her too. His scales could stop blades. His fists could break stone. None of it had mattered. She had found every weakness in his body and exploited them with perfect accuracy. She had known exactly where to hit and exactly how hard. She had beaten him not through strength, but through knowledge, through preparation, through the patient accumulation of advantages that she deployed at exactly the right moment. This was not how warriors fought. Warriors clashed with power and skill. They overcame obstacles through force. They proved their worth through dominance. This human had done something different. She had treated the fight like a puzzle to be solved. She had analyzed him, understood him, and then switched him off like a malfunctioning machine. It was terrifying, and it changed everything. The Valorian official floated to the center of the arena. Its voice echoed through the hall. The fight is concluded. General Vorax is unable to continue. The victory goes to Cadet Megan Cole of Earth. A few humans in the delegation began to clap. Then, some other species joined in. The applause grew and spread until the entire arena was filled with the sound of dozens of different species showing their appreciation in dozens of different ways. Admiral Blake put his hand on Megan's shoulder. "Cadet," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the noise, "remind me to never make you angry." Megan allowed herself a small smile. "You followed orders, sir. That was never going to be a problem." She looked across the arena at Vorax, who was still being supported by his soldiers. Their eyes met across the distance. No words were needed. He had called humans prey. She had shown him what predators really looked like. And now the entire galaxy was watching. Word of the fight spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, recordings of the match were being watched on thousands of worlds. News networks ran the footage again and again, slowing it down, analyzing every moment, interviewing experts who tried to explain what had happened. Most experts failed. They could describe what Megan had done. They could identify the pressure points she had targeted and the techniques she had used. But they could not explain how a species as young as humanity had developed such precise and deadly combat methods. So they started researching. And what they found changed everything they thought they knew about humans. The researchers dug into human history. They expected to find a story of peaceful beings who had developed advanced weapons to compensate for their physical weakness. They expected to find a species that had avoided danger whenever possible. What they found was something else entirely. They found a species that had survived ice ages by refusing to die. Humans had lived through periods when mountains of ice covered half their world, when temperatures dropped so low that other species simply froze and disappeared. Humans had survived by adapting, by creating shelter and fire, by hunting animals that were bigger and stronger and faster than they were. They found a species that had hunted megafauna, creatures that made Kathrani look small. Ancient humans had chased woolly mammoths and giant bears and saber-toothed cats across frozen landscapes. They had developed hunting techniques that used patience and endurance instead of raw power. They would chase prey for days without stopping, walking and running until the larger animals simply collapsed from exhaustion. They called this persistence hunting. No other species in the galaxy had developed anything like it. They found a species that had developed thousands of different ways to kill. Every culture, every nation, every tribe on Earth had created its own combat methods. Wrestling, boxing, judo, karate, kung fu, wrestling, fencing, archery. The list went on and on. Humans had been perfecting the art of violence for tens of thousands of years. They found a species that had survived plagues and famines and natural disasters, and wars so terrible that they had killed hundreds of millions of people. Each catastrophe should have ended them. None did. Humans just kept coming back, rebuilding, learning from their mistakes, becoming stronger. They found a species that had nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons, then pulled back from the edge and decided to reach for the stars instead. Humans had looked at their own potential for destruction and chosen a different path, channeling their aggression into exploration and discovery. The researchers shared their findings. Alien governments convened meetings. Military leaders studied the recordings of the fight with new understanding. And slowly, the perception of humanity began to change. They were not prey animals pretending to be predators. They were something far more dangerous. Predators who had learned to wear the mask of peace. On Nexus Prime, the summit continued for 3 more days, but the atmosphere had shifted. Other species looked at the human delegation with new respect, and in some cases, new caution. Diplomats who had ignored Admiral Blake now sought meetings with him. Military leaders who had dismissed human tactical thinking now asked for exchanges of information. Megan herself became a celebrity she did not want. Reporters from dozens of worlds requested interviews. Other soldiers wanted to train with her. Scientists wanted to study her reflexes and muscle response times. She declined all of them, politely but firmly. "I did not fight for attention," she told Admiral Blake when he asked about her reluctance. "I fought because someone had to. Because we cannot be respected if we let ourselves be humiliated without response." Blake nodded slowly. "And what about Vorax? Do you think he learned his lesson?" "I think," Megan said carefully, "that I will find out soon. He requested a private meeting with me before the summit ends." Blake raised an eyebrow. "And you agreed?" "I think I have to, sir. This is not just about me anymore. It is about what happens between our species going forward." The meeting took place in a small conference room away from the main halls. Megan arrived alone, as requested. Vorax was already there, standing by a window that looked out at the stars. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Vorax did something that shocked her. He bowed his head. Among the Kethrani, this was one of the highest gestures of respect. It meant acknowledging someone as an equal or even a superior. It was never given to those considered weak or unworthy. "I underestimated you," Vorax said, his deep voice quiet. "I underestimated all of your kind. I looked at your size and your softness and saw only weakness. I did not see the truth beneath." He lifted his head and met her eyes. "I have conquered many worlds. I have defeated many enemies. But I have never faced anything like you. You saw through me as if I were made of glass. You found every weakness I did not know I had, and used them against me without mercy." Megan remained silent, letting him speak. "My people value strength above all things," Vorax continued. "We believe that the strong deserve to rule, and the weak deserve to serve. But you have shown me that strength is not just about muscles and scales and size. There are other kinds of strength. The strength of knowledge, the strength of patience, the strength of understanding your enemy better than he understands himself." He took a step closer to her. Despite everything, Megan did not flinch. "Humans are not what I thought," Vorax said. "You are not prey. You are something we have never encountered before. You are predators who have learned to wait, who have learned to watch, who have learned to strike only when victory is certain." He paused, then added quietly, "I will not make the mistake of underestimating you again. And I will ensure that my people do not either." Megan considered his words carefully, then she extended her hand in the human fashion. "We do not seek enemies, General," she said. "We have had enough of war on our own world. We came to the stars looking for something better, for allies, for friends, for others who understand that the galaxy is big enough for all of us." Vorax looked at her hand. He knew what the gesture meant. He had seen humans use it during the summit. A sign of trust, a sign of peace, an offer of connection between two beings who had been opponents. Slowly, carefully, he took her hand. His massive palm engulfed her small fingers. He was aware, more than ever, of how much damage those fingers could inflict. "Our people will need time to adjust," he admitted. "Our pride has been wounded. There will be some who want revenge, who will see your victory as an insult that must be answered." "And what will you tell them?" Megan asked. Vorax allowed something that might have been a smile to cross his face. "I will tell them the truth, that I challenged a human and lost, that she showed me mercy when she could have killed me, and that any Kethrani who wants to test himself against humanity should be very, very sure he is ready to learn the same lesson I learned." He released her hand and stepped back. "We will meet again, Megan Cole. Perhaps next time it will be as allies rather than opponents." "I would like that," Megan said honestly. Vorax nodded once, then turned and left the room. Megan stood alone by the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there were billions of people who would never know what had happened here. They would go about their lives, raising children, and building homes, and dreaming dreams, never realizing that a young woman on a space station had just changed how the entire galaxy saw them. Admiral Blake found her there a few minutes later. "How did it go?" he asked. Megan turned from the window. Her expression was calm, but there was something new in her eyes. Something satisfied. "We made progress," she said. "Real progress. He understands now." "Understands what?" Megan smiled, just slightly. "That humans are not what we seem, that we have never been prey, and that the galaxy will be much better off if they stand beside us rather than against us." She walked past him toward the door, then paused. "Sir, thank you for trusting me. I know it was not an easy decision." Blake shook his head. "I did not trust you, Cadet. I trusted your training, your knowledge, and your judgment. You earned this. All I did was get out of your way." Megan nodded and left to rejoin the delegation. Admiral Blake stayed by the window for a while longer, watching the stars. The galaxy had received its lesson. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not soft. Humanity was what happened when a species refused to die, refused to surrender, refused to accept any obstacle as permanent. They had been forged by ice and fire and war and plague. They had been tempered by struggle and hardship and loss. They had emerged from their own troubled history, not as victims, but as survivors. And now the stars knew it too. Humanity had arrived, and they were just getting started. The station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower. It was the largest structure ever built by the Galactic Coalition, and today it was filled with beings from over 40 different worlds. Ships of every shape and size docked at its many ports. Inside its massive halls, creatures that breathed different gases and saw different colors all walked together under one roof. This was the Galactic Coalition Summit. It happened once every 5 years, and it was the most important political event in known space. Leaders came to make deals, generals came to show strength, and everyone came to watch, to judge, and to remember. Among all these powerful beings stood a small group of humans. Earth had only joined the galactic community 60 years ago. In the long history of the universe, this was nothing. Many species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even learned to make fire. To most aliens, humans were babies taking their first steps. Some found them interesting. Most found them unimportant. A few found them annoying. Admiral Henry Blake led the human delegation. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. He wore his dress uniform with all its medals, though he knew most aliens did not understand what they meant. He walked with his back straight and his head high, showing no fear, even when creatures 3 times his size passed by. Behind him walked his staff and his honor guard. Among the honor guard was Cadet Megan Cole. Megan was 23 years old. She had graduated from the United Earth Military Academy just 4 months ago, finishing at the top of her class. She was not tall. She was not physically impressive. She had brown hair tied back in a simple bun and light green eyes that noticed everything. Her uniform was perfect. Her boots were polished until they shined like mirrors. She knew why she was here. The Academy had selected her for this mission because she was disciplined, smart, and good at staying calm under pressure. Her job was simple: stand behind the Admiral, look professional, say nothing unless spoken to, represent humanity with dignity. It should have been easy. The first day of the summit was filled with ceremonies and introductions. Megan stood at attention for hours while alien leaders made long speeches about peace and cooperation. She watched creatures with tentacles shake hands with creatures made of living crystal. She saw beings that floated through the air greet beings that slithered on the ground. The galaxy was strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. But one species drew her attention more than any other: the Kethrani. They were impossible to ignore. Each Kethrani warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in thick scales that looked like natural armor. They had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle. Their faces were flat, with wide mouths, full of sharp teeth. Their eyes were yellow and cold, like the eyes of predators. The Kethrani Empire controlled over 200 worlds. They had conquered most of them through war. Their culture valued strength above all else. The weak served the strong. The strong took what they wanted. It was simple and brutal, and it had made them one of the most feared powers in the galaxy. General Vorax led the Kethrani delegation. He was old for his kind, nearly 90 years, but age had not made him weak. His scales were dark green, almost black, and covered with the scars of countless battles. He wore ceremonial armor, decorated with the symbols of all the worlds he had conquered. When he walked, other beings moved out of his way. Megan watched him during the opening ceremony. She saw how he looked at the other species. He looked at them the way a predator looks at prey. He was measuring them, judging them, deciding if they were worth his time. When his eyes passed over the human delegation, he did not even slow down. To him, they were beneath notice. That night, there was a formal dinner in the Great Hall. Hundreds of beings sat at tables arranged in a giant circle. The food was strange, designed to be safe from many different biologies. Megan ate something that tasted like chicken, but looked like blue pudding. She did not ask what it was. General Vorax sat at the table of honor with other high-ranking military leaders. His voice was loud, and his translator made sure everyone could understand him. He told stories of his conquests. He bragged about enemies he had killed with his bare hands. The other Kethrani laughed and cheered. Then he started talking about humans. "Look at them," Vorax said, pointing one of his 4 arms toward the human table. "So small, so soft, no claws, no armor, no real strength. They are prey animals pretending to be predators." Some aliens laughed nervously, others looked uncomfortable. A few nodded in agreement. Admiral Blake kept eating as if he had not heard. His face showed nothing. "I have studied their history," Vorax continued. "They spent most of it killing each other. They nearly destroyed their own planet before they even reached the stars, and now they sit among us as if they belong here. It is almost sad." Megan felt her jaw tighten. She kept her eyes on her plate, but her hands had become fists under the table. "Perhaps we should be kind to them," Vorax said, with a cruel smile. "They are like children who have wandered into a room full of adults." They do not understand how small they truly are. Admiral Blake finally looked up. His voice was calm and steady. The Kethrani have always had strong opinions, General. We appreciate your honesty. Vorax laughed. At least one human understands his place. That is good. Stay quiet, stay out of our way, and perhaps your species will survive long enough to become interesting. The dinner continued, but the mood had changed. The other species watched the humans with new eyes. Some felt pity. Some felt contempt. A few felt curious about how the humans would respond. Megan said nothing for the rest of the night. She followed protocol. She remained professional. But inside her chest, something cold and patient was waiting. She had grown up hearing stories about how the galaxy looked down on humanity. She had trained for years, knowing that one day she might have to prove them wrong. She had hoped it would not come to that. But hope and reality were different things. As she returned to her quarters that night, she passed a window that looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there were billions of humans who were counting on people like her to represent them with honor. General Vorax thought humans were weak. He thought they were prey. Megan knew the truth. Humans had never been prey. They had been something far more dangerous. They had been the creatures that learned to hunt anything, no matter how big or how strong. She went to sleep that night with a quiet thought in her mind. Let them underestimate us. Let them mock us. Let them believe we are nothing. When the time came, she would show them exactly what humans were made of.